Good evening and welcome to this Municipal Channel 53 special report entitled After the Quake. I'm Pete Coglanese, and as most of you know by now, the effects of the 7.1 magnitude quake which struck Northern California on October 17th have extended well beyond that Tuesday afternoon, more than a week ago, and are continuing to affect us today. The focus of tonight's program is a look at the Cupertino situation. Most of you are well aware of the damaging effects in such places as San Francisco, Oakland, in Santa Cruz, and in Los Gatos. But how has the earthquake affected us here locally in Cupertino? And what can we expect in the weeks and months to come? Joining me here today is Cupertino City Manager Don Brown, who will help answer some of these questions. But before we go to Don, we're going to take a quick look back into time to shortly after 5 p.m. Tuesday, October 17th. This was the scene outside Cupertino City Hall late Tuesday afternoon as a major earthquake registering 7.0 on the Richter scale jolted Northern California. The quake, centered approximately 10 miles northeast of Santa Cruz on the San Andreas Fault, produced moderate to major damage throughout the Bay Area, including parts of the Santa Clara Valley. Cupertino City officials were quick to activate the Emergency Operations Center at City Hall in coordination with county-wide disaster response efforts. During the course of the evening, EOC officials were flooded with numerous damage reports within the immediate Cupertino area. Perhaps the most serious incident was this structure fire at 7556 Orange Blossom Drive in South Cupertino, which broke out soon after the quake. The fire produced a large brown plume that could be seen for miles along the western side of the valley. Neighbor Norman Wild returned home to find the fire raging out of control just across the street from his home.
Don Faust, he did a major part in saving that house right next to the right of it, because he got up there with a hose and he was hosing the corner of that roof down so that wouldn't get there. But the big problem, he also helped get the dog out of their backyard, and there was no injuries because the wife was out, and they even saved their parrot. They brought the parrot over to our house for a while, and then they stayed with her son last night, who has a home in Campbell.
In addition to the incident at Orange Blossom Drive, city officials were faced with several other local emergencies. EOC officials responded to each of these incidents on a priority basis with assistance from local fire and law enforcement agencies. Other incidents included an unsubstantiated report of a landslide near Deep Cliffs Golf Course. Although no major slide was observed, some erosion did occur when swimming pools overflowed their banks just up the hill from the green. At the Cupertino Library, volumes upon volumes of books littered the floor as the library remained closed throughout the day as personnel began refiling and repairing the books. Utilities remained out throughout much of Cupertino Wednesday morning, making driving a hazard throughout the city. These crossing lights at Bub and Rainbow malfunctioned when power was restored to the area. At McClellan Ranch Park, the main Parks and Recreation office was evacuated when it was found that the foundation had shifted several inches. Similar structural damage was experienced citywide from business to business, residence to residence. And as businesses were slowly cleaning up, there were reports of a severe water shortage in Cupertino due to damage at the Rinconada treatment plant.
The main message we want to get across to the residents of Cupertino is to conserve water. We are served by 3 different water companies in Cupertino. 2 of those companies are private utilities which receive their water from the Rinconada treatment plant that is operated by the Santa Clara Valley Water District. There is some damage to this treatment plant, and it is affecting our water supply.
The tests have been done, and Cupertino water is safe. There was some question at times. That is fine, no problems there.
In response to the possibility of additional earthquake aftershocks, many residents have taken to stores to stock up on such supplies as flashlights, batteries, and bottled water. Administrative Specialist Pat Josias recommends that you take the following precautions.
Families. We found that they need to prepare their homes in such ways as having their water heater strapped down. There's still a possibility of aftershocks, and so we need to make sure that they have some water on hand and that they are concerned about the food and the supplies that they do have.
Cupertino is on a limited
Things
water
are
supply.
slowly returning to normal in Cupertino more than a week after the earthquake, but it will undoubtedly be some time before life returns to the way we knew it before this catastrophe struck. When we return, we will be joined by Cupertino City Manager Don Brown, who spent most of his time this past week assessing the post-earthquake situation here in Cupertino.
Have you noticed? It's getting warmer. There's been a drought and forest fires. Streams have been drying up and record heat waves have been reported. What's happening? Scientists call it the greenhouse effect, the gradual warming of the Earth caused in part by increased carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, CO2 that lets the sun's rays in but traps the heat rising from the Earth. If we don't fight the greenhouse effect now, droughts and heat waves could become intolerable. The National Arbor Day Foundation urges you to do something about it right now. Plant trees. You see, growing trees take carbon dioxide out of the air and help conserve energy. This is Eddie Albert. I urge you to fight the greenhouse effect by planting trees. Our free booklet, Conservation Trees, will show you how. To get your copy, write the National Arbor Day Foundation, Nebraska City, Nebraska. Do it now.
Welcome back to our earthquake special here on Municipal Channel 53. Joining me now in the studio is Cupertino City Manager Don Brown. Don, thank you very much for being here today.
My pleasure, Pete.
Now, you've been through this thing from the very beginning and have undoubtedly spent most of your time this past week dealing with the crisis situation here in Cupertino. First off, can you tell us, where does Cupertino stand now, more than a week after the initial earthquake?
Well, Cupertino made it through the earthquake relatively unscathed compared to some of the cities that we've been reading about in the newspaper. I think we've been very fortunate to have good construction standards, and we're a fairly new community, and most of our buildings have been built with earthquake standards in place, and so we did pretty well. We did have a lot of concern about structural damage, people trying to get back together with their families, getting water back online and so forth. But most of it came through pretty smooth. I think we're about back to normal now, although we're still inspecting residential dwellings at people's requests to see if they have any structural damage. So I'd say in terms of city service, other than normal building inspections, we're about back to normal right now.
What are you finding to be the most common form of damage here in Cupertino?
Oh, I think most residential units had content damage, things falling off of shelves, breakage, shelving falling over on cars and garages and so forth. We did have some of our water lines, our public water lines, break the night of the earthquake and got those fixed that night. And some office industrial buildings had some damage that is still undergoing review, and but that was mainly it.
What are some of the figures involved in the damage total for Cupertino?
Well, these have to be taken with a little bit of a grain of salt because they're estimates, and as we get to know more about some of the process of repairing the buildings, we'll know more of the exact cost. But we're estimating right now that in private dwellings, including industrial, office, and residential, about $58 million of damage in Cupertino. About $8 million of that we're estimating to be residential, and about the $50 million to be industrial commercial. We've also estimated about $300,000 in public damage to our own facilities, either buildings or roads or water lines, etc. And that's the best we have right now, and that undoubtedly will get more precise as we go along.
Now, $58 million compared to, say, $500 million, as in Los Gatos, doesn't really seem to be that much, although, you know, of course, it is a lot of money.
Yeah. Well, I think that reflects on really on exactly what happened during the earthquake. As we know, Los Gatos downtown took severe damage, and I think a lot of that had to do with the location of the fault and also the location and the age of the buildings in their downtown. Same with Santa Cruz. I don't think there's any way we can compare what happened in Cupertino to what happened in those communities.
With such a large damage total in Los Gatos, $500 million, is Cupertino prepared to assist any of the neighboring communities in any other way?
Yes, in fact, I have talked to the city manager's office in Los Gatos the day or two after the earthquake, and basically just put out an offer to assist if there was any way we could. They appreciated that. They have asked for a couple of particular help items. One was some chain link fencing, which we tried to provide, and also some videotaping from our Channel 53 crew, which we provided, just so they'd have a historical record of the damage. And I suspect as time goes on and they assess their financial situation, that the county as a whole may take a look at and see if there's a city that's going to be in severe financial straits. There may be something we'd want to do as a county to see if there was a way to relieve some of that pressure.
Okay, as you well know, and as you mentioned earlier, one of the features of a major earthquake is the disruption of utility services, and of course Cupertino did experience that shortly after the quake. Electricity and gas was disrupted. But now, after several days after the quake, we still seem to have a water problem here in Cupertino, although most of the lines, as you mentioned, were restored. Can you maybe expand a little bit, and what exactly is the water problem we are?
Sure. First of all, the water in Cupertino is absolutely safe, just to get that out of the way. And it was always that way throughout the quake, no contamination. The biggest problem was at the Rinconada treatment plant, which is basically our sole source of water supply. In normal situations, went out of commission totally for several hours during the earthquake. We do have wells that we can pump in an emergency, and we did that with auxiliary power. And we kept our water tanks full during the stage, and that was a relief because we didn't know what kind of fire pressure demand would be put on the system. We did have one structure fire during the early stages of the earthquake, and luckily that was the only fire we had. But today we are in pretty good shape. Rinconada is up about 25% of its normal capacity, and I think in the next 4 to 6 weeks they'll be fully operational. We are getting priority treatment, I think, from Rinconada because it's our only source of water. And so right now I would say we're getting about the normal amount of water we would get, although we are asking people to continue conserving so that we don't take advantage of that water situation out of Rinconada treatment plant.
Okay, I know that was one of the major concerns of some of the residents who had called into City Hall over the past week, was the water situation. What are some of the other problems that residents are running into, some of their concerns?
Well, I think now that we're 3 or 4 days after the earthquake, people are starting to ask questions about their homes. Is my home okay structurally? I think as long as it was standing after the quake, most people, that was not their number one priority. It was cleaning up the mess and making sure the family was safe and so forth. Now they're starting to look at cracks and they're saying, gee, is this a major problem? And they're calling us. And I think yesterday we had more calls on structure inspections than we had during the first couple of days after the quake. So that's taking quite a bit of our time, just responding to those requests. And what we do is we go out and we look at it, our inspectors, and we tell them if it's a minor problem, we'll let them know. If it looks more major, we would advise them to get somebody to come in and take a look at it from a structural point of view. So that's been a big issue. Initially, we had a lot of calls about power because PG&E had power outages all over the place. That was pretty much cleared up by Friday of the week of the earthquake, and And I think all the gas turn-ons pretty much were handled by that following Sunday. So I was real pleased with PG&E's response on that.
I just want to let our viewers know that we will be joined later in this program by Joe Antonucci, who will be talking about some of the building inspecting that's going on and what residents can do to get more information about that subject. Don, I'd like to talk a little bit now about the federal relief situation here in Cupertino. How do residents go about applying for federal disaster relief, and are they eligible here in Cupertino for that, for those grants?
Yes, we think so. First, let me just talk about the public's ability to access that situation. FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Act, has set up locations throughout the county. They also have telephone numbers, which I know you're going to give out during the program, that people can call and get stuff by mail or just get questions answered. And my understanding is there are grants and loans available for earthquake damage. And I read in the paper yesterday where Congress, I think, approved about $2.5 billion to go towards the earthquake relief effort, and that should go through FEMA, is my understanding, to provide those grants and loans. So I think the system is up and running. We went to a briefing, some of our staff, Saturday morning, where FEMA gave us all the rules and regulations and how people should access that. And we have those available here at City Hall if people would want to call City Hall for further information, or they could call the direct line through FEMA. The second part of that is the city's reimbursement for costs and repairs and damages. And we are tracking that pretty carefully, what equipment we're using, what manpower was out working beyond normal hours. And we expect that a portion of that will be reimbursed through FEMA or the State Office of Emergency Services, and we're trying to keep track of that too.
Great. When we return, we're going to take a first-hand look at the Emergency Operations Center. That's the center located here at Cupertino City Hall, and look at some of the activity that followed shortly after the earthquake on Tuesday.
And that this free society speaks with power, force, and decision. In this crusade,
The political machine that put these people into office is still run by the same person. You. Democracy. It can't be of the people and for the people if it's not by the people. Vote.
Welcome back to our earthquake special here on Municipal Channel 53. Don, it's ironic that it was only a few months ago, actually a couple months ago, that the city of Cupertino went through an earthquake simulation exercise, which was sponsored by the county of Santa Clara. What have you learned from that exercise, and how did some of the activity translate into the actual emergency that took place here last week?
Okay, good question. That was, I think, when you look back on that training, as brief and as artificial as it may have seemed, I think it did give us some help. I think everybody that was involved in this, I think this was the first time that the EOC was activated for a real emergency. And so it was a first live test for us. Certainly for me, as a fairly new city manager, it was the first ever being involved in trying to coordinate activities involving an earthquake. I think the training we had, as brief as it was, helped kind of identify who was going to follow up on specific functions, and that was the most value of it. And when we were looking for emergency medical treatment, Steve Dowling, we knew, was the guy to do that. And that's his functional responsibility. Normally, he's Parks and Recreation Director. In emergencies, in charge of coordinating medical services. And so we knew that he was the guy to do that. When we wanted to keep track of the status of things, we knew that Bob Cowan, who normally is Director of Community Development, he's the guy to keep track of status of events and so forth. And so while there was, I think, some confusion about what exactly should be done and which things should sequence one after the other. I think we had the idea of who was responsible for the major functions down pretty well, and that really came out of that practice session.
Good. We do have some footage now of some of the events that took place shortly after 5:04 p.m. when the earthquake hit. These are scenes from the Emergency Operations Center that we'll be looking at. And maybe you can tell us, just give us a run-through of some of the events that took place shortly after the earthquake, and how responsibilities were delegated and so forth.
Okay. Well, there's Steve Dowling. I was just talking about him. One of the things that we learned early on was that we had no idea how extensive the earthquake damage was elsewhere. We knew we lost power. We knew it was a pretty good shaker, but it was really through the media that we figured out that it was a significant disaster in the region, and that's what prompted us to be a little more alert to what was going on.
We also see here is CARES, the Cupertino Amateur Radio Emergency Services, and they probably provided a vital link with...
Yeah, they were excellent. They showed up with about 5 or 6 people. They have access to radios throughout the community, even when power is down, and they were available to provide information on what was going on in the community.
How were things, what was the attitude of the department heads that were there during the crisis situation? You said there was a little bit of confusion at first, but how did things develop later on in the process?
Well, it was very calm. I thought people were, very businesslike, but also very informal about how to get things done. We did a lot of just sort of talking through things. Where are we on this? What's the status on this? Where should we be expending our resources at this moment? And to do that, I would bring together 2 or 3 people at a time and just have a little informal chat over in the corner. And I thought it worked pretty well. We learned a few things. We learned a lot of things from this exercise that I think will help us react better in the future if we have to do this again.
Mm-hmm. What were some of the strengths out of the response, do you think?
I think the strengths were, first of all, we were very fortunate that the timing of it, most of the key people were still here, had not gone home yet. That may not always be the case, but we did have most of the department heads here and available and ready to respond immediately. That was very useful. I think the other thing was just sort of a professional demeanor that people had, that let's just keep things calm. We'll deal with each issue as this comes up. We try to predict what things will become in the next couple of hours. I think once we got through the initial couple of hours, things really we had a feeling of just kind of keeping track of things rather than trying to respond to emergencies and so forth.
Okay, I'd like to take a look now at some other footage that was shot earlier in the week. This is from the Cupertino, this is also from Cupertino City Hall, but this took place last Saturday, the Salvation Army relief drive, and maybe, Don, you can tell us about some of the community support, the overwhelming community support that came through to help some of the victims of the earthquake.
Yeah, I was amazed. The City Council members and Chamber of Commerce members really were responsible for getting this started, and it just started with a phone tree where people would call 5 people and tell them to call 5 more people each. That's how the word got out initially. And then it started hitting the media, and there's Barb Koppel, City Councilman member, and Frank Strazzarino, the Chamber of Commerce director. Once it hit the media, from Friday through Sunday, my understanding is 16 of the Salvation Army trucks were filled with clothing and food and camping material. There's one of the trucks. 16 of those were filled up.
That's
It was
right.
an amazing response.
It's incredible, and we just want to set word to our viewers at home, just that Cupertino is not the site of any more relief pickups or drop-offs. That if you do want to donate goods to the Salvation Army, this is the number that you should call right here at the bottom of the screen. So I believe that is in downtown San Jose. So please do not drop off any more of your goods here at Cupertino City Hall.
There is one thing that the Cupertino Library is still accepting, and that is non-perishable foods. They do have a bin in their lobby, and during normal library operations they are accepting food. But there is no local drop-off point now for clothing, and we really can't accept anymore.
Okay, that's good information. Don, thank you very much for being here today. It was very informative, and hopefully things will get better as the days progress, and we'll get back to our normal operations in a few days or weeks.
Okay, thank you, and thanks to the community for being so cooperative on this whole thing.
Thank you. When we return, we're going to take a look at what you can do to check out your home for structural damage and how the building inspection work is going on here in Cupertino. We'll be back in a moment.
My mother said I was too much trouble. She threw me out. It's pretty terrible out here. I wish I could go back home if they take me. I just don't know what else to do.
Wherever you are, Covenant House can get you help. Call us on the 9 line. It's free. 1-800-999-9999.
Covenant House.
Welcome back to our earthquake special here on Municipal Channel 53. We are joined now by Chief Building Official for the City of Cupertino, Joe Antonucci. Joe, thank you very much for being here today.
Welcome.
Joe, can you maybe just tell us what is the damage you've been running into here in Cupertino related to the quake?
Well, basically, Cupertino came off pretty well in the quake due to the fact that a lot of our buildings are new. We're a relatively new community. The damage that we've experienced is mostly cosmetic, cracks in the sheetrock, stress cracks. The biggest problem we've had is in the residential area with chimneys. Chimneys either cracked or collapsed, and we have in Cupertino 16,000 homes, and we're doing a lot of surveys upon request from the public to check the damage in their homes. One of the problems is with the limited resources we have and the number of homes we have to check, that if people see that if they look at their home themselves and cannot see any damage, then really nothing we can do for them. If we see, if they have something they want us to look at, an obvious problem, we'll be happy to do that. But if they're uncomfortable, their best step they could take would be to contact a structural engineer to come in that can spend some time and really evaluate their structure for either damage this time or what may happen in the future.
So people should only call in if they have an immediate need, if they see something that might actually jeopardize the structure of their home, so to speak.
At this point in time, yes. Down the road, when the immediate crisis eases up and we have more time, we may be able to do more for them. But at this point, we're trying to get the people on their feet that are really see something that they're nervous about. In most cases, it's turned out that there's really nothing to worry about other than the cosmetic appearance of the problem.
Okay, Joe, we have some interesting footage to show right now. We'll have some footage of downtown Los Gatos, and as you know, Los Gatos was very close to the epicenter. But as we mentioned, Cupertino is only about 10 miles up the road from Los Gatos. Maybe you could talk about the difference in some of the structures between downtown Los Gatos and why Cupertino really came out of this as well as it did.
Yeah, I think that the difference again is that the buildings we have here are relatively new, built to a much higher seismic standard. The old buildings like you're seeing here in the picture, unreinforced masonry buildings, they're built to a standard that just can't handle that type of seismic activity. The buildings today are designed to withstand that kind of a force, and basically that's the difference. We're a new community. Los Gatos is an old community, and that's what's unfortunate about it.
All right, Joe, I think that'll be we're running out of time, unfortunately. We could really talk about this earthquake situation for several more minutes at least, and but we are running out of time, and I'd like to thank you and of course Don Brown in the earlier segment for joining me today. Stay tuned to Municipal Channel 53 throughout the course of the month, and we will give you continued updates on the earthquake situation throughout the Bay Area and here in Cupertino. Thank you again for joining us this evening.